The California sun was setting as Keanu Reeves pulled up to the Grand Palace Hotel in his modest sedan. Unlike many Hollywood stars who traveled with entourages and demanded special treatment, Keanu preferred to drive himself when possible. It gave him time to think, to decompress after long days on set. Today had been particularly exhausting. 14 hours of physically demanding stunts for his latest action film had left his body aching and his mind craving quiet. The hotel stood like a gleaming monument to luxury against the darkening sky, its marble facade catching the last golden rays of sunlight. Keanu had stayed here once before, years ago, and remembered it for its peaceful atmosphere and professional staff who respected guests' privacy. That was exactly what he needed tonight. As he pulled into the circular driveway, a young valet approached, eyes widening with recognition as Keanu stepped out of the car. "Good evening, sir," the valet said, clearly trying to maintain his professional composure despite the flutter of excitement in his voice. Keanu smiled warmly. "Hey there, take good care of her, will you?" He handed over the keys with a gentle nod. "Absolutely, Mr. Reeves. It's an honor to have you staying with us." Keanu grabbed his worn leather duffel bag from the back seat, the same one he'd been using for nearly a decade, and slung it over his shoulder. He never packed much, just the essentials. Another habit that surprised people who expected Hollywood actors to travel with countless designer luggage pieces. As he walked toward the entrance, Keanu absently touched the small silver cross that hung from a simple chain around his neck. The cool metal against his fingertips was comforting, familiar. The necklace had been a gift from his sister years ago, during a particularly difficult time in his life. He rarely took it off, finding quiet strength in both its personal meaning and spiritual significance. The hotel's massive glass doors slid open silently as he approached. Inside, the lobby was a masterpiece of upscale design, soaring ceilings, with crystal chandeliers, marble floors polished to a mirror shine, and arrangements of fresh flowers that perfumed the air with subtle fragrance. A pianist played softly in the corner, the gentle notes of a classical piece floating through the space. Despite his exhaustion, Keanu paused for a moment to take it all in. Beauty in any form still caught his attention, still made him want to stop and appreciate it. It was a quality that had remained unchanged throughout his decades in the film industry. At the reception desk, a poised woman in a tailored suit looked up as he approached. Her professional smile shifted subtly as recognition dawned in her eyes. "Good evening and welcome to the Grand Palace Hotel," she said, her voice measured and calm despite the slight tremble in her hands as she typed on her keyboard. "Hi there," Keanu replied, his voice low and tired but unfailingly polite. "I have a reservation under Reeves." "Of course, Mr. Reeves. We've been expecting you." Her fingers moved efficiently across the keyboard. "You'll be staying with us for 5 nights, is that correct?" Keanu nodded, rolling his shoulders slightly to ease the tension that had built up during the day's filming. "That's right. If possible, I'd appreciate a quiet room. Been a long day." "Absolutely. We've placed you in one of our premium suites on the top floor. It offers excellent privacy and a view of the city that I think you'll enjoy." She slid a key card across the polished marble counter. "Would you like assistance with your bag?" Keanu glanced down at his single duffel. "No, thank you, I can manage." He smiled again, the kind of smile that reached his eyes and made people feel genuinely seen. "But I appreciate the offer. Our concierge can arrange anything you might need during your stay," she continued. "Private dining, transportation, spa services." "Actually," Keanu interrupted gently, "I was hoping to have dinner in the restaurant. Tonight. Something simple. Is that possible without a reservation?" The receptionist nodded quickly. "Of course. The Grand Terrace is open until midnight. I'll let them know you're coming so they can prepare a suitable table." "No need for special arrangements," Keanu said, his tone friendly but firm. "I'd prefer to be treated like any other guest." The woman looked slightly surprised but nodded her understanding. "As you wish, Mr. Reeves. The elevators to your right will take you directly to your floor." Keanu thanked her and headed toward the elevators, aware of the subtle shift in the lobby's energy as people noticed him. He was used to it. The whispers, the surreptitious glances, the occasional brave soul who approached for an autograph or photo. Fame had been his companion for so long that he'd learned to navigate it with grace, to accept it as part of his reality without letting it define him. Inside the elevator, he pressed the button for the top floor and leaned against the wall, closing his eyes briefly as the car began its smooth ascent. The cross rested against his chest, a small weight that grounded him. Some people found it surprising that he wore a religious symbol, as if being an actor and having faith were somehow incompatible. But Keanu had never cared much for other people's expectations or judgments. He lived by his own compass, guided by principles of kindness and respect that had served him well. The elevator doors opened silently, revealing a hushed corridor with plush carpeting that muffled his footsteps as he made his way to his suite. The keycard unlocked the door with a soft click, and Keanu stepped into a space that somehow managed to be both opulent and tasteful at once. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city lights below, now twinkling against the darkening sky. The suite was larger than his entire first apartment, with a separate living area, bedroom, and a marble bathroom that could probably fit a small car. Fresh flowers stood on a side table, their subtle fragrance filling the air. Keanu dropped his bag on a nearby chair and walked to the windows, taking in the view. From this height, the city looked peaceful, orderly, so different from the chaotic energy he'd felt on the streets below. Up here, removed from it all, he could almost forget the demands waiting for him tomorrow. More stunts, more lines to remember, more hours under the bright lights. He touched the cross again, a habit he wasn't even conscious of anymore. Then he moved away from the windows and headed to the bathroom, eager to wash away the day's exertions. The hot water of the shower eased his aching muscles, and by the time he emerged, wrapped in one of the hotel's plush robes, he felt somewhat restored. Keanu changed into clean jeans and a simple black t-shirt, his usual offset uniform. He considered removing the cross necklace, tucking it away as he sometimes did for film roles, but decided against it. The hotel was full of people wearing designer logos and expensive jewelry. His modest silver cross was hardly going to draw attention. His stomach reminded him that he hadn't eaten since a hurried lunch on set many hours ago. The hotel restaurant beckoned with its promise of a quiet meal and perhaps a glass of wine to help him unwind. Keanu checked his watch, just past 9. Still plenty of time before the kitchen closed. He took the elevator back down to the lobby, this time sharing the space with an older couple who smiled politely, but didn't seem to recognize him, which was always a small relief. The pianist was still playing, the melody changing to something more contemporary but still elegantly rendered. The restaurant, called the Grand Terrace, opened off the main lobby through a series of arched doorways. Inside, the lighting was dim and flattering, creating pools of golden warmth around each table. A wall of glass doors stood open to the night air, leading to an actual terrace where a few guests dined under heat lamps and strings of delicate lights. The maitre d' approached, with a professional smile. "Good evening, sir. Do you have a reservation?" "No, sorry," Keanu replied. "I'm staying at the hotel and was hoping to get dinner." Recognition flickered in the man's eyes, but to his credit, his professional demeanor never wavered. "Of course. We're happy to accommodate hotel guests. Would you prefer the terrace or inside?" Keanu glanced around the restaurant, noting a quiet corner table that offered a degree of privacy while still allowing him to people watch. "Inside would be great. Maybe that table there if it's available?" "Certainly, please follow me." As the maitre d' led him through the restaurant, Keanu felt the subtle ripple of awareness that followed him, the hushed whispers, the quick glances. He kept his eyes forward, his expression neutral but not unfriendly. Years in the public eye had taught him how to move through spaces while drawing minimal attention to himself, a skill he valued highly. The corner table was perfect, positioned so that his back was to the wall, giving him a view of the entire restaurant while affording him some privacy. A small candle flickered at the center of the crisp white tablecloth, casting soft light that wouldn't draw attention to his face. "Your server will be with you shortly," the maitre d' said, placing a menu before him. "Enjoy your evening, mister." Reeves. Keanu thanked him quietly and opened the menu, though his mind was already made up. After a day of physical exertion, his body craved simple, nourishing food. When the server appeared, a young woman who managed to contain her excitement at serving him to a professional smile, he ordered a steak, medium rare with seasonal vegetables and a glass of red wine. As he waited for his meal, Keanu found himself observing the other diners. The restaurant clientele matched the hotel's luxury status: wealthy tourists, business executives in expensive suits, a few faces he vaguely recognized from the entertainment industry. At a large table near the center of the room, a group of well-dressed men and women were celebrating something, their laughter occasionally rising above the restaurant's subdued hum of conversation. The server returned with his wine, a rich Cabernet, that caught the candlelight as she poured it into a delicate glass. Keanu thanked her with a genuine smile that made her blush slightly before she hurried away. He took a sip, appreciating the complex flavors that unfolded on his palate, and felt the day's tension begin to ease from his shoulders. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more physical demands on set. But for now, in this quiet corner of an elegant restaurant with good wine and the promise of a comfortable bed waiting upstairs, Keanu found himself content. The silver cross rested against his chest, a small, personal anchor in the shifting seas of his public life. Little did he know that this simple symbol would soon become the catalyst for an unexpected confrontation, one that would reveal the true character not only of those around him, but of Keanu himself. Keanu's steak arrived perfectly cooked, the aroma making his stomach growl in anticipation. He thanked the server and began to eat, savoring each bite. The simple pleasure of a good meal after a long day's work was something he never took for granted. Fame and fortune had changed many things in his life, but not his appreciation for these small moments. As he cut another piece of steak, he became aware of rising voices from the large table in the center of the restaurant. The celebration had grown louder, fueled by expensive champagne that flowed freely. Normally, Keanu wouldn't have paid much attention. People enjoying themselves didn't bother him. But something in the tone of one particular voice made him glance up. A man in his 50s wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent was gesturing dramatically as he spoke. His face was flushed with alcohol, his voice carrying across the restaurant despite the efforts of his companions to quiet him. "I'm telling you, this place used to have standards," the man was saying, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Now, they let just anyone in. Look around, it's not exclusive anymore." A woman at his table placed a manicured hand on his arm, murmuring something that seemed intended to calm him, but he shrugged her off. Keanu returned his attention to his meal, unconcerned. He'd encountered far worse than a loud, entitled diner in his years in the public eye. The man's words were just background noise, easily ignored. But then the tone shifted. The loud voice became more focused, more pointed. Like that guy over there in the corner. Yeah, the one with the long hair. Looks like he just walked in off the street, doesn't he? Keanu kept his eyes on his plate, his expression neutral. This wasn't the first time someone had commented on his casual style, and it surely wouldn't be the last. He took another sip of wine, determined not to let the man's rudeness spoil his evening. "Wait a minute," the voice continued, rising with a note of recognition. "Isn't that—" "Yeah, it is. It's that actor, the one from those ridiculous action movies." Now other diners were turning to look, some with embarrassment at the man's behavior, others with curiosity. Keanu maintained his composure, cutting another piece of steak and chewing slowly. Years in the public eye had taught him that engaging with such behavior only escalated situations. The loud man said something else to his table, followed by a burst of uncomfortable laughter. Then, to Keanu's dismay, he stood up, swaying slightly. As he straightened his designer jacket, "I'm going to say hello to our celebrity guest," he announced to his companions, ignoring their protests. Keanu watched from the corner of his eye as the man made his way across the restaurant, moving between tables with the entitled confidence of someone used to taking up space in the world. The restaurant staff noticed too. A server and the maitre d' exchanged concerned glances, clearly debating whether to intervene. Too late. The man arrived at Keanu's table, standing over him with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, well, if it isn't Hollywood royalty dining among us common folk," he said, his words slightly slurred. "What an honor." Keanu looked up, meeting the man's gaze directly but saying nothing. His expression was calm, neither welcoming nor hostile. No, the man continued, undeterred by Keanu's silence. "I've seen a couple of your films, the ones where you know kung fu or whatever." He waved a dismissive hand. "My kids watch them." "That's nice." Keanu replied quietly. "I hope they enjoyed them." The man seemed taken aback by the response, perhaps expecting either anger or fawning, gratitude for his backhanded recognition. He recovered quickly, his gaze dropping to Keanu's chest where the silver cross caught the candlelight. "What's this?" he asked, reaching out as if to touch the necklace. Keanu leaned back slightly, creating distance. "It's personal," he said simply. The man's eyebrows rose. "A cross? Really? Didn't figure you for the religious type." His tone had shifted from merely obnoxious to something more pointed, more deliberately insulting. "Bit old-fashioned, isn't it, or is it just a costume accessory?" Around them, the restaurant had grown quieter. Other diners were watching the interaction, some with open discomfort, others trying to pretend they weren't listening. At the man's table, his companions were visibly embarrassed, one woman covering her face with her hand. "It was a gift," Keanu said, his voice still calm but cooler now. "From someone important to me." "A gift," the man repeated, a mocking edge to his voice. "How sweet. But really, a cross in this day and age? In a place like this?" He gestured around at the upscale restaurant. "Bit out of place, don't you think? Like wearing sneakers to the opera." Keanu set down his fork and knife carefully, arranging them on the plate with deliberate precision. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but clear. "Everyone has the right to their beliefs," he said, "and to wear what matters to them." The man leaned in, his alcohol-scented breath washing over Keanu. "Some beliefs belong in the Dark Ages, my friend. Like those silly crosses and the whole idea of—" "Sir," a new voice interrupted. The maitre d' had appeared at the man's elbow, his professional demeanor firmly in place despite the tension in his stance. "I must ask you to return to your table. You're disturbing our other guests." The man straightened, affronted. "Do you know who I am? I've been coming to this hotel for 20 years. "Yes, sir, and we value your patronage," the maitre d' replied smoothly. "Which is why I'm sure you understand our need to ensure all guests can enjoy their meals in peace." For a moment it seemed the man might argue further. His face flushed, darker, his hands clenching at his sides. Then he glanced around, becoming aware of the attention he'd drawn, the disapproving looks from nearby tables. "Fine," he said finally, shooting Keanu a look of contempt. "I was just making conversation. Anyway." He turned to head back to his table, then paused, looking over his shoulder. "Nice chat, movie star. Maybe next time wear your costume jewelry somewhere more appropriate." With that, he stalked back to his table, where his companions received him with strained smiles and nervous glances toward Keanu. The maitre d' turned to Keanu, genuine regret in his eyes. "Mr. Reeves, I cannot apologize enough for that disturbance. Please allow us to—" Keanu shook his head. "No need for apologies. You handled it well." He offered a small, reassuring smile. "These things happen. Nevertheless, your meal tonight will be complimentary, of course, and if you'd prefer to finish dining in your suite, we can arrange that immediately." "That's really not necessary," Keanu insisted. "I'm fine here." The last thing he wanted was special treatment or to make more of a scene by leaving. The maitre d' hesitated, then nodded. "As you wish. Please don't hesitate to let us know if you need anything at all." As the man returned to his post, Keanu became aware of the other diners still watching him. Curious to see how a celebrity would react to such a confrontation, he simply picked up his fork and knife and resumed eating, his movements unhurried, his expression betraying nothing of his inner thoughts. But inside, A familiar heaviness had settled in his chest. It wasn't the insult itself that bothered him. He'd developed a thick skin over decades in the public eye. It was the reminder of how quickly some people judged others, how easily cruelty could masquerade as sophistication. The cross around his neck felt heavier now, not just with its physical weight but with the weight of what it represented, both to him personally and apparently to others who saw it as something to mock. He finished his meal and measured bites, no longer really tasting the food. When the server returned to ask about dessert, he declined politely, requesting only a cup of coffee. As he waited for it to arrive, he noticed the loud man's table had grown subdued. Their celebration seemed dampened, though whether from embarrassment at their companion's behavior or from the maitre d's intervention he couldn't tell. The coffee came, dark and fragrant. Keanu wrapped his hands around the cup, letting its warmth seep into his fingers. He sipped slowly, looking out toward the terrace where the night air had grown cooler, causing most diners to move inside. Only one couple remained outside, sitting close together under a heat lamp, talking in low voices with their heads bent toward each other. There was something poignant about them, their absorption in each other, their small private world existing, alongside but separate from the restaurant's subdued drama. Keanu watched them for a moment, finding something calming in their quiet connection. When he finally signed the check, insisting on paying despite the maitre d's offer, and stood to leave, he felt the weight of eyes following him. The loud man's group watched him with a mix of expressions: embarrassment, curiosity, and from the loud man himself, a lingering hostility. Keanu nodded politely in their direction, a small gesture that seemed to discomfort them more than anger would have. In the elevator riding back to his suite, Keanu let out a long breath, rolling his shoulders to release the tension that had built. There. The confrontation had left him feeling drained in a way that even the day's physical stunts hadn't managed to do. Perhaps he was getting too old for all of it. The public scrutiny, the constant navigation of others' expectations and judgments. Back in his suite, he walked directly to the windows, looking out at the city lights that now blazed in full force against the night sky. The cross hung against his chest, catching the reflection of the room in its polished silver surface. Keanu touched it gently, thinking of his sister, of her smile when she'd given it to him. Some things matter more than other people's opinions, she told him then. Standing alone in the luxury hotel room, surrounded by all the trappings of success but feeling oddly isolated, Keanu held on to those words like a lifeline. He didn't know it yet, but the confrontation in the restaurant was only the beginning. What would unfold over the next few days would test not just his patience, but his deepest principles about how to move through a world that sometimes seemed determined to misunderstand him. Morning came with soft golden light filtering through the hotel room's curtains. Keanu woke early, his body still on film schedule despite his late night. For a few peaceful moments he lay still, letting the previous evening's confrontation fade into perspective. One unpleasant interaction didn't need to define his entire stay. He rose and went through his morning routine. 20 minutes of stretching to prepare his body for another day of stunts, a quick shower, and meditation by the window as the city below came fully awake. The cross hung against his chest, catching the morning light. He'd considered leaving it in his room today, tucked safely in his bag, but something in him resisted. Hiding it felt too much like surrender. His phone buzzed, with a text from the film's assistant director. Due to technical issues with one of the special effects rigs, filming would start 2 hours later than planned. Keanu texted back his acknowledgement, then glanced at his watch. The unexpected free time was a gift. He decided to have breakfast in the hotel restaurant and then perhaps take a walk to clear his head before the day's work. The grand terrace looked different in the morning light, airier, less intimate. Most tables were occupied with business people starting their day with coffee and newspapers, or tourists planning their sightseeing over plates of eggs and fruit. Keanu was shown to a small table near the windows overlooking the hotel's garden courtyard. He ordered coffee, whole grain toast, and a bowl of fresh fruit. As he waited, he noticed the hotel staff moving with extra attentiveness around him this morning, their smiles a touch warmer, their service a bit more solicitous. Word of last night's incident had clearly spread. He wished it hadn't. The last thing he wanted was to be treated differently because one guest had been rude. His breakfast arrived, brought by the same young server who had attended his table the night before. Her smile was genuine as she set down his plates. "Good morning, Mr. Reeves. I hope you slept well?" "I did, thank you," he replied, returning her smile. "And please call me Keanu." She looked pleased but professionally hesitant. "Enjoy your breakfast, Keanu." With a small nod, she moved away to attend to other tables. Keanu had just started on his toast when he felt a shift in the restaurant's atmosphere. Looking up, he saw the source immediately. The loud man from last night had entered the dining room, accompanied by two of his companions from the previous evening. They were seated at a table across the room, but the man's gaze found Keanu almost immediately, his expression hardening in recognition. Keanu looked away, focusing on his breakfast. He had no interest in another confrontation. The day ahead would be physically demanding, and he needed to center himself, not get caught up in petty drama. For a while, it seemed his wish would be granted. The restaurant continued its gentle, morning hum of conversation and clinking silverware. Keanu finished his fruit and was on his second cup of coffee when the peace was broken by a raised voice, the same voice that had disturbed his dinner. "You'd think they'd have a dress code for breakfast, too," the man was saying, his voice deliberately loud enough to carry. "Some standards about proper attire, or at least about appropriate jewelry." His companions looked uncomfortable, one of them glancing apologetically in Keanu's direction before quickly looking away, but the man wasn't finished. "I mean, this isn't some roadside diner, it's the Grand Palace. People pay good money to stay somewhere exclusive." Keanu kept his eyes on his coffee cup, his expression neutral. Around him, other diners were beginning to notice the commotion, some turning to look, others purposely avoiding eye contact with anyone involved. The young server who had brought Keanu's breakfast appeared at his table, coffee pot in hand. "More coffee, sir?" she asked, her voice steady though her hands trembled slightly as she poured without waiting for his answer. "Thank you," Keanu said quietly. As she finished pouring, she leaned slightly closer. "I'm sorry about that," she whispered, nodding subtly toward the loud man's table. "The manager has been notified." Keanu nodded his thanks, but before the server could move away, the loud man's voice cut through the restaurant again. "Hey, waitress, some service over here if you're not too busy catering to the celebrity." The young woman flinched visibly, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. She straightened, turning toward the man's table with professional composure that Keanu had to admire. "I'll be right with you, sir," she called, her voice impressively steady. "Now would be better," the man replied, his tone openly mocking. "Unless you're hoping for an autograph or something equally pathetic." That was enough. Keanu set down his coffee cup and stood up. The server looked at him with alarm. "Please," she whispered, "don't trouble yourself. We're used to difficult guests." "No one should be used to being treated that way," Keanu replied quietly. He wasn't angry, at least not in the explosive way that might have made for good tabloid stories. Rather, he felt a deep, calm certainty that this behavior shouldn't go unchallenged. He walked across the restaurant, aware of the sudden hush that fell over the other diners. The loud man watched his approach with a mixture of surprise and smug satisfaction, clearly pleased to have provoked a reaction. Keanu stopped at their table, his posture relaxed but his eyes direct and unwavering. "Good morning," he said, his voice low and controlled. The loud man leaned back in his chair, a thin smile spreading across his face. "Well, well, the movie star himself, gracing us with his presence." Keanu ignored the taunt. "I couldn't help overhearing your comments. I don't mind what you say about me, but I'd appreciate it if you'd treat the staff with respect. They're just doing their jobs." The man's companions looked mortified, one of them staring fixedly at his plate, the other glancing around nervously at the watching diners. But the loud man himself seemed to swell with self-importance. "I'll speak to the help however I please," he said, his voice thick with disdain. "I've been coming to this hotel for 20 years. I practically own the place. Nobody owns people, Keanu replied simply. And kindness costs nothing but means everything. Something in the quiet certainty of Keanu's voice seemed to cut through the man's bluster. For a moment, he looked almost taken aback. Then his gaze dropped to the silver cross still hanging around Keanu's neck, and his expression hardened again. Still wearing that thing, I see, he sneered. Trying to make some kind of statement? Or is it just for publicity? I bet your PR team loves it, gives you that wholesome image to sell to the masses. Keanu didn't take the bait. What I wear is my business, he said calmly. Just like how you treat others is your business, I'm simply suggesting that everyone deserves basic respect. Respect is earned, the man retorted, and I don't respect fairy tales or the people who believe in them. He flicked a dismissive hand toward Keanu's necklace. That cross represents everything wrong with this world. People believing in magical sky beings instead of taking responsibility for themselves. A tense silence fell over the restaurant. Even the kitchen staff had paused to watch the confrontation unfold. The young server stood frozen nearby, coffee pot still in her hand, her eyes wide. Keanu took a deep breath. He hadn't come over to debate religion or personal beliefs. Everyone's entitled to their own views, he said evenly. I'm only here because you were being unkind to someone who didn't deserve it. Unkind? The man repeated, his voice rising. I'll tell you what's unkind. Having to look at religious symbols in a 5-star hotel while I'm trying to enjoy my breakfast. It's offensive. This place should have standards about these things. Before Keanu could respond, a new voice entered the conversation. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice. The hotel manager had appeared at Keanu's side, his face a professional mask that barely concealed his displeasure. He was a tall man with silver hair and the kind of polished bearing that spoke of decades in luxury hospitality. The loud man scoffed. Are you serious? You're taking his side? He jabbed a finger toward Keanu. Do you know who I am? My company books 30 corporate events here every year. I'm well aware of who you are, Mr. Reynolds, the manager replied, his voice cool and measured. And while we value your business, we cannot allow any guest to disturb others or speak disrespectfully to our staff. This is outrageous, the man, Mr. Reynolds apparently, sputtered. He's the one making a scene, parading around with his religious propaganda. The manager's expression didn't change. Mr. Reeves has done nothing against our hotel policies. Wearing personal jewelry, religious or otherwise, is every guest's right. Reynolds slammed his hand on the table, causing the silverware to jump, and several nearby diners to gasp. So that's how it is then? You're choosing a washed-up actor over a loyal customer? We're not choosing anyone over anyone, the manager replied firmly. We're simply enforcing our standards of conduct, which apply equally to all guests. Reynolds stood up so abruptly that his chair screeched against the floor. His face was flushed with anger. This isn't over, he said, glaring first at the manager, then at Keanu. Not by a long shot. He threw his napkin onto the table. Come on, he snapped at his companions. We're leaving. His two dining partners rose reluctantly, both avoiding eye contact with anyone as they followed Reynolds, who stormed out of the restaurant without looking back. In the wake of their departure, the restaurant remained silent for a long moment. Then slowly the normal sounds resumed. Quiet conversations, silverware against plates, the gentle clink of coffee cups being set in saucers. The manager turned to Keanu, genuine regret in his eyes. Mr. Reeves, I cannot apologize enough for this disruption to your stay with us. Keanu shook his head. You have nothing to apologize for. You handled it perfectly. He glanced toward the young server, who was still standing nearby, looking shaken. Are you okay? He asked her gently. She nodded, a small smile breaking through her nervousness. Yes, thank you for standing up for me. That was really kind. It was the right thing to do, Keanu replied simply. As he returned to his table to finish his now cold coffee, he was aware of the other diners watching him, some with open admiration, others with thoughtful expressions. He hadn't intended to make a scene or to become the center of attention. He'd only wanted to protect someone who didn't deserve to be mistreated. The silver cross felt warm against his skin, a reminder of values deeper than temporary confrontations or fleeting fame. As he signaled for his check, Keanu had no way of knowing that the morning's events were merely a prelude to what would unfold later that day, a situation that would force him to make a decision about his continued stay at the Grand Palace Hotel. Filming ran late that day. What should have been a 10-hour shoot stretched to 14 as the special effects team struggled with technical issues on the elaborate stunt sequence. By the time Keanu returned to the hotel, the evening was well advanced, his body aching from repeated takes of a particularly demanding fight scene. All he wanted was a hot shower and a quiet meal in his room. As the hotel came into view through the car window, he felt a mixture of relief and wariness. After the morning's confrontation, he wasn't eager for another encounter with Reynolds or anyone else who might take issue with his presence or his necklace. The lobby was busy when he entered, filled with well-dressed people heading to dinner or evening events. Keanu kept his head down, moving purposefully toward the elevators. He'd almost made it when he heard his name called. "Mr. Reeves?" "Excuse me, Mr. Reeves." He turned to find the hotel manager approaching, his expression professionally neutral but with a hint of tension around his eyes. "I apologize for catching you in the lobby," the manager said, lowering his voice. "But I thought you should know that Mr. Reynolds has made a formal complaint about you to hotel management." Keanu blinked, taken aback. A complaint? About what? The manager glanced around, then gestured toward a quiet corner of the lobby. Once they were relatively private, he continued, his voice still hushed. "He's claiming that you confronted him, unprovoked at breakfast, and made him feel unwelcome because of his views on religion." The manager's expression made it clear what he thought of this version of events. "He's demanding that the hotel take action, or he'll withdraw his company's considerable business from us." Keanu absorbed this information silently. It wasn't the first time someone had twisted events to make him look bad, but it was disappointing nonetheless. "I see," he said finally. "What kind of action is he expecting?" The manager looked uncomfortable. "He's asking that you be required to remove your cross necklace while in public areas of the hotel, or alternatively, that you be asked to find accommodation elsewhere." Keanu felt a flicker of genuine surprise. In all his years navigating Hollywood and the public eye, he'd encountered many forms of entitlement, but this was a new one. "And what's the hotel's position?" he asked quietly. "Officially, we're taking his complaint under advisement," the manager replied carefully. "Unofficially, I want to assure you that several staff members have already come forward to clarify what actually happened this morning." The young server was particularly adamant about setting the record straight. Keanu nodded, touched by their support but still troubled by the situation. "I appreciate that. The last thing I want is to cause problems for your staff." "You've caused no problems, Mr. Reeves. In fact," the manager broke off, hesitating briefly before continuing. "In fact, your behavior has been exemplary, especially in the face of significant provocation. Many celebrities in your position would have caused a scene or demanded special treatment." "I'm just here to do my job and get some rest between filming," Keanu said simply. "Like everyone else." The manager smiled slightly. "Not quite like everyone else, if I may say so." His expression grew serious again. "I wanted to warn you because Mr. Reynolds is hosting a large dinner party in our private dining room tonight. Given his mood earlier, I thought you should be aware in case you encounter him again." "I appreciate the warning," Keanu said. "I was planning to order room service anyway." "A wise choice, perhaps." The manager hesitated again. "Mr. Reeves, I want you to know that regardless of Mr. Reynolds's financial leverage with the hotel, we would never ask a guest to compromise their personal expression or beliefs. Your necklace is your business and your right to wear." Keanu felt a small weight lift from his shoulders. "Thank you for telling me that." With a respectful nod, the manager withdrew, leaving Keanu to continue to the elevators. As he rode up to his floor, he touched the silver cross thoughtfully. The idea that someone would try to use their wealth and influence to dictate what another person could wear, especially something with personal meaning, struck him as both sad and absurd. Indi Satendi, his sweet Keanu shed his filming clothes and stepped into the shower, letting the hot water soothe his tired muscles. As the steam filled the bathroom, he tried to clear his mind of the day's tensions, both physical and social. He had 3 more days of filming in the city, 3 more nights booked at this hotel. The simplest solution would be to just move to another hotel, to remove himself from a situation that was becoming unnecessarily complicated. But something in him resisted that idea. Moving would feel too much like letting Reynolds win, like validating the man's belief that his money gave him the right to control others. After his shower, Keanu ordered a simple dinner from room service, grilled chicken, vegetables, and a glass of wine. When it arrived, he ate by the window, watching the city lights come alive against the darkening sky. The food was excellent, the view spectacular, the room luxuriously comfortable. By all measures, the Grand Palace was a perfect place to rest between grueling days on set. And yet, the earlier confrontations had cast a shadow over it all. Keanu wasn't naive. He knew that entitled behavior like Reynolds was common in places of privilege. Usually he could ignore it, rise above it. But when that entitlement extended to bullying staff or trying to control what others could wear, it became harder to dismiss. His dinner finished, Keanu decided to stretch his legs with a walk around the hotel. Despite the manager's warning about Reynolds' dinner party, he felt restless, too wound up to sleep despite his physical exhaustion. The hotel had a rooftop garden that was supposed to be beautiful at night. Perhaps that would be a good place to clear his head. The elevators opened directly onto the rooftop level, revealing a carefully designed space with winding paths through lush plantings, small seating areas tucked into private corners, and twinkling lights strung overhead like earthbound stars. At this hour it was nearly deserted, just a few couples enjoying the night air and the panoramic views of the city. Keanu found an empty bench in a quiet corner and sat down, breathing deeply of the flower-scented air. Below him, the city stretched out in all directions, a tapestry of lights and movement. It was a view that reminded him of how small individual concerns were in the grand scheme of things, a perspective he often found comforting. He'd been sitting there for perhaps 15 minutes when he heard raised voices coming from inside the hotel. Through the glass doors that led to an event space, he could see people gathered for what appeared to be a formal dinner. The doors opened, and a hotel staff member emerged, her face flushed with what looked like embarrassment or distress. She was young, probably in her early 20s, wearing the black uniform of the hotel's serving staff. As she stepped into the garden, she didn't notice Keanu sitting in the shadows. She moved to the railing and gripped it tightly, taking deep breaths as if trying to compose herself. Keanu remained quiet, not wanting to startle her or intrude on what was clearly a private moment. But then the doors opened again, and a familiar figure appeared. Reynolds, his face flushed with alcohol and anger. "Don't you dare walk away when I'm speaking to you," he called to the young woman, his voice slurring slightly. "Do you know how much money I'm spending on this dinner?" The server turned, her body language tense but professional. "I apologize, sir, but I needed a moment. I'll have another server bring your drinks right away." "That's not good enough," Reynolds replied, advancing toward her. "I want you to understand exactly what kind of service I expect for my money." Keanu stood up, making his presence known. "Everything okay here?" he asked quietly. Both Reynolds and the server turned in surprise. The young woman looked relieved to see him, while Reynolds' expression darkened with recognition and renewed anger. "You," he spat. "Are you following me now? This is a private event space." "Actually, the garden is open to all hotel guests," Keanu replied calmly. "I was just getting some air." He looked at the server. "Is everything all right?" Before she could answer, Reynolds stepped between them. "This is none of your business, actor. This is between me and hotel staff." Mr. Reynolds was unhappy with the wine selection, the server explained, her voice steady despite her obvious discomfort. "I was going to get the sommelier to suggest alternatives." "She was being insolent," Reynolds countered, "telling me the wine I wanted wasn't available, trying to push some inferior vintage on me instead." I'm sure the hotel wants to accommodate your preferences, Keanu said evenly, but it sounds like they might genuinely be out of what you asked for. Reynolds took a step closer to Keanu, his eyes narrowing. You know what I think? I think you're enjoying this. Playing the hero, defending the little people. Is that what that cross is about too? Some kind of savior complex? The server looked alarmed at the escalating tension. Please, there's no need for this. I'll get the manager to help with the wine selection. The manager knows better than to disappoint me, Reynolds said, his attention still fixed on Keanu, unlike you people who think you're special because your face is on movie posters. His gaze dropped to Keanu's necklace again. I told them they should make you take that thing off. It's offensive. How is a small silver cross offensive? Keanu asked, genuinely curious despite himself. Because it's shoving your beliefs in everyone's face, Reynolds snapped. Some of us come to places like this to get away from all that common, everyday nonsense. Keanu was silent for a moment, considering the man before him, wealthy, privileged, and somehow deeply unhappy despite it all. I think, he said finally, his voice gentle rather than confrontational, that we all believe in something, and we all show it in different ways. Save the philosophy for your movies, Reynolds sneered. This is the real world where money talks. He turned to the server. I want that wine situation fixed in the next 5 minutes, or there'll be consequences. With that, he stalked back inside, leaving the server looking shaken and Keanu feeling a deep weariness that had nothing to do with his long day of filming. I'm sorry you had to deal with that, he said to the young woman. It's not your fault, she replied, attempting a smile. Some guests are just challenging. No one deserves to be spoken to that way, Keanu said. No matter how much money they're spending. The server glanced toward the doors where Reynolds could be seen rejoining his dinner party. He's a big client. The hotel won't do anything about it. Maybe they should, Keanu said quietly, more to himself than to her. As he watched Reynolds through the glass, holding court at the head of a long table, something shifted inside him. A decision formed, clear and certain. It wasn't about the insults to himself, or even about the necklace anymore. It was about something more fundamental, about what kind of behavior should be accepted or tolerated, regardless of wealth or status. The server excused herself to find the sommelier, and Keanu returned to his room, his mind made up. There were other hotels in the city, places where perhaps money wasn't the only measure of a person's worth. Morning light filtered through the curtains as Keanu finished packing his few belongings into his worn leather duffel bag. He'd slept surprisingly well after making his decision, as if resolving to leave had lifted a weight from his mind. He moved unhurriedly, taking time to ensure he hadn't left anything behind in the drawers or bathroom. The silver cross caught the light as he bent to zip his bag. He paused, touching it briefly, then straightened with renewed purpose. His choice wasn't impulsive or emotional. It was a quiet statement about values and where he chose to spend his time and money. Downstairs at the reception desk, the same poised woman who had checked him in 3 days earlier, looked up with a professional smile that faltered slightly when she realized he was checking out early. Is everything all right with your stay, Mr. Reeves? She asked, concern evident in her voice. The room was perfect, Keanu replied honestly. And most of the staff have been wonderful. She seemed to understand the implication behind his words. I see, she said, lowering her voice slightly. We've heard about the situation with Mr. Reynolds. She looked genuinely troubled. I want you to know that his views don't represent the hotel's position at all. I believe you, Keanu said gently, but I think it's best if I finish my stay elsewhere. She nodded reluctantly and began the checkout process. As her fingers moved over the keyboard, she glanced up hesitantly. If I may ask, is it true that he demanded you remove your necklace? Keanu nodded. Among other things. The receptionist shook her head slightly, her professional veneer cracking just enough to show genuine emotion. That's just wrong. No guest should ever be asked to hide who they are or what they believe in. I agree, Keanu said. That's partly why I'm leaving. She completed the checkout and handed him a receipt. "I've removed the charges for last night, of course." "That's not necessary," Keanu began, but she raised a hand to stop him. "Please, it's the least we can do." She hesitated, then added in a lower voice. "You should know that many of the staff here have been talking about what happened, about how you stood up for Beth, our server, yesterday morning. Not many guests would do that. Anyone should have done that," Keanu replied, simply. "But they don't," she said. "That's the thing, they just don't." There was a brief silence between them, a moment of shared understanding about how the world worked and how it perhaps should work instead. "I've arranged a car for you," she said, finally returning to her professional tone. "It's waiting outside whenever you're ready." Keanu thanked her and turned to leave, but she called after him softly, "Mr. Reeves, for what it's worth, I think your necklace is beautiful." He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Thank you. It was a gift from someone I love." As he crossed the lobby toward the exit, Keanu noticed several staff members watching him, the maitre d' from the restaurant, a bellhop by the elevator, a housekeeper pausing in her work. Their expressions varied from respect to something like regret. He nodded to them as he passed, a quiet acknowledgement of their shared humanity. Outside, the morning was bright and clear, the air fresher than it had been in days. The driver held the car door open for him, and Keanu settled into the back seat, placing his duffel bag beside him. "Where to, sir?" the driver asked. "The West Side Inn, please," Keanu replied. He'd chosen it carefully the night before, a well-reviewed, but modest hotel closer to the film set, without the opulence or pretension of the Grand Palace. As the car pulled away, Keanu glanced back at the gleaming hotel facade. It was beautiful, certainly, a testament to what money and taste could create. But buildings were only as good as the values they housed, he reflected. And sometimes the most impressive exteriors concealed the most troubling flaws. The drive to the West Side Inn took only 20 minutes. The building was unremarkable from the outside, clean and well-maintained, but without the grandeur of his previous accommodation. The lobby was simply furnished, busy with regular travelers, rather than celebrities or business moguls. The woman at the reception desk did a double-take when she saw him, but quickly recovered her professional demeanor. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you?" "I'd like a room for the next 3 nights, please," Keanu said. She typed on her computer. "We have a standard king room available. Would that work for you?" "Perfect," he replied with a genuine smile. The check-in process was quick and straightforward. No special attention. No fuss, just the normal transaction between a hotel and a guest who happened to be recognizable. It felt refreshingly normal. His new room was smaller than the suite at the Grand Palace, furnished simply but comfortably. The view was of the parking lot rather than the city skyline, but somehow that seemed fitting. Keanu unpacked his few belongings, then checked his watch. He still had an hour before he needed to leave for the day's filming. Deciding to explore his new surroundings, he headed back downstairs. The hotel had a small coffee shop off the lobby, busy with guests getting their morning caffeine. Keanu joined the line, enjoying the ordinary moment. When he reached the counter, the barista, a young man with tattoo sleeves visible beneath his rolled-up shirt, gave him a friendly nod. "What can I get you?" he asked, treating Keanu exactly like any other customer. "Just a black coffee, please," Keanu replied, coming right up. The barista turned to prepare the drink, then paused and glanced back. "Hey, aren't you?" "Yes," Keanu said with a small smile. "But today I'm just a guy who needs coffee." The barista grinned. "Fair enough. 1 black coffee for just a guy." He worked efficiently, then slid the cup across the counter. "That's $4 even." Keanu paid and dropped a tip in the jar. As he turned to find a seat, he noticed a small table by the window where an elderly woman sat alone, struggling to open a sugar packet with arthritic fingers. Without hesitation, he stopped beside her. "May I help you with that?" he asked gently. She looked up, squinting slightly. "Oh, thank you, dear. These old hands don't work like they used to." Keanu opened the sugar packet and poured it into her coffee. stirring it for her with a small wooden stick. "There you go," he said with a warm smile. "You're very kind," she replied, studying his face. "Has anyone ever told you that you look like that nice actor? The one from those action movies my grandson loves?" "Once or twice," Keanu said, his eyes crinkling with genuine amusement. "Enjoy your coffee, ma'am." He found a seat in a quiet corner and sipped his coffee, watching the ordinary flow of life around him. People coming and going, most in a hurry, some pausing to chat, all just living their lives without the drama or pretension he'd left behind at the Grand Palace. His phone buzzed with a text from the film's assistant director, confirming the day's schedule. As Keanu typed a reply, another message came through, this one from the hotel manager at the Grand Palace. "Mr. Reeves," it read, "I've just learned of your departure and wanted to express my sincere regret. While I respect your decision, I feel I should inform you that Mr. Reynolds' behavior has had consequences. Following multiple staff complaints and your own experience, we've asked him to conclude his stay with us. His company's business is valuable, but not at the expense of our principles or the well-being of our guests and staff. If you should reconsider, your suite remains available. With respect and admiration." Keanu read the message twice, surprised and touched by the unexpected outcome. He hadn't left to force the hotel's hand or to make some grand statement. He'd simply chosen to remove himself from a situation that conflicted with his values. That his quiet action had somehow catalyzed a larger change was both surprising and humbling. After a moment's consideration, he typed a reply. "Thank you for letting me know. I'm glad to hear the staff's concerns were taken seriously. I'm comfortable where I am now, but I appreciate your principles and wish you all the best." As he put his phone away, Keanu noticed the elderly woman watching him curiously from her table. She smiled when their eyes met, a warm, grandmotherly smile that expected nothing in return. He smiled back, touching his cross briefly in an unconscious gesture that had become habit. His decision to leave the Grand Palace hadn't been about winning or proving a point. It had been about staying true to himself and his own quiet principles. The cross around his neck wasn't a symbol of superiority or judgment. It was simply part of who he was, a reminder of love and values that mattered more than luxury or status. The rest of his stay in the city unfolded with refreshing simplicity. The West Side Inn lacked the opulence of the Grand Palace, but it offered something more valuable, a space where people were valued for their humanity rather than their wealth or fame. Keanu filmed by day and returned to his modest room by night, finding a peace that had eluded him in more luxurious surroundings. On his last morning in the city, as he checked out of the West Side Inn, the elderly woman from the coffee shop appeared in the lobby, this time with a middle-aged man who was clearly her son and a teenage boy who practically vibrated with excitement. "I told you it was him, Dad," the teenager was saying. "It's really Keanu Reeves." The elderly woman approached Keanu with an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry to bother you, dear, but my grandson is such a fan. Would you mind terribly?" "Not at all," Keanu replied warmly, setting down his bag to greet the awestruck teenager. As he signed an autograph and posed for a photo, the silver cross caught the light, gleaming softly against his black t-shirt. The teenager noticed it and pointed. "Cool necklace," he said. "Does it mean something special?" Keanu touched it gently. "It was a gift from someone I love," he said simply. "It reminds me of what matters." The boy nodded as if that made perfect sense, and perhaps it did. In a world that often valued appearances over substance, sometimes the simplest symbols carried the deepest truths. And sometimes the quietest actions spoke the loudest about a person's character. As Keanu left the hotel and headed to the airport for his flight home, the cross hung around his neck just as it had when he'd arrived in the city. But now it seemed to carry an additional meaning. A reminder that standing firm in one's values, even in small ways, could ripple outward in unexpected directions, touching lives and perhaps in some small way, changing them for the better.